One of Scrivener's most powerful features is the ability to outline your book however you want. But many people struggle to stay organized. The program is so flexible that it can be daunting for a beginner to create structure for themselves. In this video, I'm going to show you how to outline your novel using Scrivener in several of the major outlining methods. I'll also show you some examples from my own novels so that you can take what works for you and apply it with your writing. What's up, guys? This is Michael Around with Author Level Up, giving you the best tools and strategies for writing faster and reaching readers with your stories. There are so many different outlining methods out there. In this video, I will assume that you have basic knowledge of the major ones. If you want a quick overview of the most commonly accepted outline methods, check out my video on outlining. Link is in the video description. And let's set a few ground rules. First, everyone has to find their own way. Do what works best for you, even if that means pantsing. I've seen some Scrivener projects that are completely decked out, color-coded, with lots of images and other bells and whistles. And some writers, that's their style. And if that's you, fine, but just remember that there are other ways to do it as well. Nothing more, nothing less. Your time is almost always spent better writing, and it's better to have an imperfect outline and an amazing story written than to have a beautiful outline and no story at all. So let's jump into Scrivener. All right, so we're here in Scrivener, and we are inside my Android X series. Now, I wrote this series back in 2015, and it's one of my better-selling series. When I wrote it, I was learning to outline, so I was experimenting with a bunch of different methods, and I actually used a lot of the major outlining methods for this series. Now, it's not something I'd recommend that you do, but for the sake of this video and teaching you how I outlined in Scrivener, it actually comes in pretty handy because I can show you real examples of these methods at work, and these are examples that I actually used in real production, not examples that I made up. So let's talk about what I did before I even started outlining, because I think that is pretty important. So all of my stories start with a what if question. So I take that, I expand it, and I just have a free writing session, and I keep writing for about 5-10 minutes until I have something interesting. So in this case, I started with a simple question: what if a novel took place in the year 2300? What would life be like? What if robotics and androids were real? And I just kept writing. No barriers, no critical voice, no thinking through any of this, just hands to the keyboard, typing like a madman for 5 to 10 minutes just to see where I end up. And it took me about 5 minutes to do this, and when I was done, I actually had the bones of what will become Android Paradox, which is book 1 in the Android X series. And it's actually pretty amazing that very little that I wrote here actually changed. Most of this ended up being incorporated into the novel in some fashion. So that's certainly one way to start before you outline, to make sure that your outline gets off on the right foot. It's just starting with a what if question and expanding on that. Now, just make sure you don't spend too much time, doing your free writing. But the next thing that I did with this series before I started outlining was my character work. Character work is pretty important because it's what you want to start with, because you want to know where your character is going to go, what kind of journey you're going to take them on, as well as what kind of journey you're going to take the reader on. And so I started with my main character X, and I start with like a simple description of what he is. So an android special agent struggles to learn the truth about his origins. And I did a GMC, goal, motivation, conflict. And then I just did another free writing session about who I thought that X would be. And so this is a little bit longer. It was about 1,500 words. Explored this quite a bit. And you can do this, and I did this with all of my main characters in the series. So I've got an android special agent who struggles to learn the truth about his origins, did some free writing on him. I've got Shortcut, his sidekick, who's an up-and-coming android programmer who desires to prove himself. And then Jaslyn, an android bounty hunter living between humans and androids. And I did the same thing for her, and then I did the same thing for my villain. I write sketches about their history, their background, anything that I think is important in their past that I could potentially use in the novel when I'm outlining. All that stuff is important. But the key when you're doing character work, if you choose to do this, is never hold yourself to any of your pre-production work. Don't feel like you're married to everything that you write. I think so many people see this and think that they just have to write everything that they've written in their outline or in their pre-production materials to the letter, and that's not true. It's just nothing but trouble. Just remember, an outline is simply a tool to help you stay organized. When you're doing this stuff, just remember to let your creative voice out to play. Anything is possible, and it can totally change later. So once I've done a concept and once I've done some of my character work, you're ready to jump into the outlining. And remember, there's no one way to outline, but how I started with this series was I started with a history of the world. So what you can't see is that I did a lot of research into Android robotics and Android science and all the predictions and things that people think will happen in the future with robotics, and read a lot of books, listened to a lot of shows, watched a lot of videos, talked to some people that I knew. And so what I thought would be helpful was to create a history of the world, since the novel takes place in the year 2300. So I started off in the present day in 2020, and I just kind of made some predictions, took some liberties of where I thought that the world was going to go. And goes into 2100, which I had to put my thinking cap on for that. And then there's a singularity in 2199 that's pretty important throughout the series, when basically androids almost destroy the world. And then there's what happens after the singularity, and all the way down to the father of androids being born, all the way down to the main character being born, all the way down to 2300, which is the present day. So I find this immensely helpful for science fiction and fantasy. If you're writing a thriller in the modern world, it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But a timeline is something that certainly can help you. Now, another way that you could do this is by using beats. Now, if you know the guys at Sterling and Stone, or Self-Publishing Podcast, or currently known as the Story Studio Podcast, they use this for their outlining. So beats is basically your story in narrative form, so that you have a story-like indicator of where the story is going to go as you're writing it. So some people find this very effective, and basically, you're writing a couple thousand words per chapter, summaries of where the story is going to go. So I did this with Android Paradox, and actually I did it with all 3 books in the series. And as you can see here, I've got more than a few paragraphs, but basically just wrote out where I thought the story would go. And for the most part, chapter 1, I think, was fairly accurate. The only thing with beats is I think that they're effective. I think that they certainly can help you. But just remember, don't let beats dictate everything. And by the way, before we continue, I just wanted to let you guys know that what you see here in this outline, it's not even accurate, not by a long shot. I deviated from this outline like crazy. That's why I don't have any issues showing it to you. I say that because some writers might see this and think that they have to write beats and hold themselves to that, and you don't have to do that. All right, another method that you can use to outline your story is the plot point method. So probably many of you are familiar with this. I think that the plot point method is the easiest method to understand if you're just starting off, because you can easily see it in movies, and you can learn from it in movies. And so anytime you go to the movie theater or turn on Netflix, you're basically doing research, which I think is helpful when you're just starting off. It gives you some good confidence, and it also gives you a good structure to follow. Now, the 3-act method, you probably heard of that as well. That's pretty easy to understand too. So what I did here was I combined them together. I find that they go together very well. So I took the plot points, broke those into acts, and then I use that to help guide me throughout the rest of the novel. Now, if you've never heard of the plot point method or the 3-act method, refer to my video, How to Outline a Novel, and that will give you everything that you need to know, and you'll watch that, and then you come back here, and hopefully what you see here will make a little bit more sense to you. So out of all the things I did to outline the novel, I would say that this was the most accurate. I've got my inciting incident, my plot points, my pinch points, my mirror moment, all the things that you would expect to see in a story that follows the plot point theory. Now, what I like about the plot point theory is that it gives you some structure. What I like about the 3-act method is that it gives you a good sense of a beginning, middle, and end, but it doesn't always give you structure. And so that's why I think the two of them go together pretty well. So that's a method that you can use as well. And the next method I'm going to talk about is the snowflake method. Now, I use the snowflake method. I kind of used it for Android Paradox. And basically what you do is you start with a 1-sentence summary of the novel, and then you expand on that. So an Android special agent finds himself in the middle of a political conspiracy while trying to become human. not a description of Android Paradox at all, but you got to start somewhere, right? And so you expand that, and so I expanded it, and eventually ended up into a version that I was happy with. But again, a lot of this stuff changed, and then I did some character analysis, and as you can see, I definitely deviated from the snowflake method quite a bit. But that's okay if you're using the snowflake method. I think the key here, and I think the important thing that I did here, was I was just starting to think about the marketing. You know, when you start with a one sentence summary, this summary that you have, very well, if you do your job, very well could end up in the book description as your first line. So just something to think about. All right, so let's say you're done outlining and you're ready to start the novel. Scrivener offers some tools that can help you when you're outlining, and they'll help you stay organized. So I'm inside the manuscript now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the corkboard. And as you can see here, this is the threaded corkboard. So I'll change this here. So as you can see, this is the corkboard, and I've got a synopsis for each chapter. And as you can see, they're all organized and color-coded. So red is my main character X, blue is my sidekick Shortcut, and green is Jaslyn, who comes in later in the book. And if I click on this here on the bottom, I can get into threaded corkboard mode, and I can click on this to change it. And this basically just gives me a visual representation of what's in the book. You might find that helpful. Now, if I go to outline mode up here, you'll see the novel in a list format, and you can see the labels here. You can certainly use the status if you want. But what I've done here that I thought was helpful, that I'll tell you guys, is you may see that I added an extra category. So this is custom metadata. So custom metadata allows you to tell Scrivener what is inside each of your chapters. So for example, I have all of mine broken out by location. So what I'll do here is, if you click that little gear, this takes you to location, and you can create that. And so what you can do is you double click, you can describe where the novel takes place. This is a good tool that certainly can help you stay organized. And so later on, when you're editing, what you can do is you can filter by locations, and you can pull up all of the different chapters that appear in a certain location if you needed to edit it later. So that's really how you outline a novel. It's not so much, there's no secret in Scrivener in terms of, okay, well, you need to do this, use this tool, or use that tool. Essentially, it boils down to whether you prefer the corkboard, outline mode, or both. But I think the key is how you set your outline up and what you choose to do in your documents outside of your manuscript in Scrivener. So I went through a few of the major methods here. Certainly yours is going to look different than mine, but I always think it's helpful to see how other people use programs, and maybe this will give you some ideas that you can take away and use in your own workflow. I hope this video showed you some tips that you can use to outline your next novel in Scrivener. I'm interested in hearing from you guys. How do you outline your books in Scrivener? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to watch the rest of the videos in my Scrivener Essentials series. Links are in the comments. And if this is your first time watching, I'd love to have you subscribe. Every week I publish videos just like this one with writing and marketing advice to help you write better and grow your influence with readers. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.